Welcome back to the Expensive Coins History Channel. Picture this for a moment. A small bronze coin, worn smooth by time, resting quietly at the bottom of a drawer. Maybe it once sat in the pocket of a worker heading home after a long shift. Maybe it passed through a pub counter, a corner shop, or a quiet Irish village decades ago. It never looked special. It was never meant to be rare. But today, that same coin has become something entirely different. A silent survivor of history, and in the right condition, a hidden asset collectors would fight to own. We're starting with the 1980 Ireland 1 penny coin. At first glance, it seems like one of the most ordinary coins ever made. Bronze, simple design, modest size. But that's exactly why so many people overlooked it. Back in 1980, Ireland was going through economic shifts. Inflation, changing currencies across Europe, and modernization were reshaping daily life. Coins like the Irish penny were tools, not treasures. They were meant to move, not to be kept. And that's where the story becomes powerful. Because when something is made in huge numbers and used without care, very few survive untouched. Most 1980 Irish pennies were handled roughly. Tossed into tills, scraped against other coins, left in damp jars, forgotten in sheds and garages. Over decades, bronze reacts with the air, darkens, stains, corrodes, and slowly, most of these coins lost the crisp details they were born with. But not all of them. Somewhere along the way, a few coins escaped that fate. Maybe a child kept one in a small collection. Maybe a bank worker rolled a fresh mint coin and forgot it in storage. Maybe someone simply tucked it away and never came back for it. These rare survivors are the reason collectors today are paying attention. The design itself carries a quiet strength. On one side, the iconic Irish harp, not flashy, not loud, but deeply symbolic. The harp isn't just decoration. It represents identity, resilience, and cultural pride. For collectors, that symbolism adds emotional weight. They aren't just buying metal. They're buying a piece of a nation's story. On the reverse, the hen with chicks, a design that feels almost humble. But that simplicity is exactly what makes it unforgettable. It reflects rural Ireland, agricultural roots, and a slower time when life wasn't driven by screens and speed. For older collectors, especially men who grew up seeing coins like this in circulation, that image hits something deeper than nostalgia. It brings back memory. Now here's where things get interesting. Not every 1980 Irish penny has value. In fact, most are still only worth a small amount. The difference, and this is what separates pocket change from serious money, is condition and preservation. Collectors look for details most people never notice. Sharp feathers on the hen, clean harp strings, original mint luster still glowing under the light.
No corrosión, no scratches.
No cleaning damage. Because here's a truth many people don't realize. Cleaning an old coin can destroy its value instantly. A shiny surface might look better to the eye, but to a collector it signals lost originality. Authentic aging is respected. Artificial shine is not. This is why untouched coins are so rare. Over the years, well-meaning owners polished them, scrubbed them, or exposed them to humidity without realizing they were erasing value. The few coins that remain in near-perfect condition today are like time capsules. And collectors love time capsules. Another factor driving demand is generational collecting. Men between 35 and 65, especially those rediscovering hobbies later in life, are entering the coin world in huge numbers. Many of them are no longer chasing modern trends. They're chasing meaning, history, tangible objects they can hold, study, and pass down. Coins like the 1980 Irish penny fit perfectly into that mindset. Affordable entry once, but now rising in recognition. And then there's the psychological side of collecting. The idea that something small and overlooked can hold surprising worth. It taps into a universal feeling, the possibility that treasure might already be within reach. That maybe, just maybe, the thing sitting quietly in a forgotten tin could be worth far more than anyone ever imagined. Auction trends over the past few years have quietly reflected this shift. While flashy gold coins grab headlines, serious collectors are increasingly hunting overlooked bronze issues in exceptional condition. The logic is simple. Rarity isn't always about age or metal. Sometimes it's about survival, and survival is unpredictable. That unpredictability creates opportunity. Because most people who owned these coins never thought to protect them. They spent them, lost them, or ignored them, which means the number of high-grade examples shrank naturally over time.
No hype, no sudden discovery.
Just decades of quiet disappearance. And now, as awareness grows, the few that remain are stepping into the spotlight. Imagine holding one today. The weight is modest, but the presence feels different when you understand the story. You're not just holding bronze. You're holding 1980, a snapshot of Ireland before the digital age, before globalization accelerated everything, before coins began disappearing from everyday life. There's also something deeply satisfying about physical history. Unlike digital assets that exist only on screens, a coin connects you directly to the past. It has edges shaped by time, surfaces touched by unknown hands, and a journey no document can fully record. That tactile connection is something collectors value more as the world becomes increasingly virtual. And that's why coins like this are rising in emotional value as well as financial value. They remind people of a slower world, a more tangible one, a world where value wasn't measured in clicks but in craftsmanship and endurance. But here's the part that truly changes perspective. Because once you understand how rarity forms not through intention, but through time, neglect, and survival, you begin to look at everyday objects differently. You start wondering what else has been overlooked. What else is quietly aging into significance? That shift in awareness is what turns ordinary viewers into serious collectors. And it all starts with a coin most people once ignored, a small Irish penny from 1980, dismissed for decades, now being rediscovered by those who understand that history doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it hides in plain sight, and sometimes it waits patiently for the right moment to be recognized. And when that recognition finally comes, the value isn't just measured in money. It's measured in realization, the moment you understand that something ordinary has been extraordinary all along. Now let that sink in for a second, because what we just explored is only one piece of a much bigger picture. One coin, one year, one story of survival and rediscovery. But the deeper you go into Irish coin history, the more surprising the journey becomes. Because the next coin we're about to uncover carries an even more powerful twist. A story shaped by older circulation, heavier wear, and a rarity that built itself slowly, almost invisibly, across decades. Now let's travel a little further back in time, because the next coin comes from an era that feels even more distant. Not just in years, but in atmosphere. The 1974 Ireland 1 penny coin was born into a world that moved differently. This was a time before digital banking, before smartphones, before the idea of cash ever fading from daily life. Coins weren't collectibles then. They were necessities. They moved constantly from hand to hand, from market stalls to buses, from small-town counters to city streets. And that constant movement is exactly what shaped this coin's destiny. When the 1974 Irish penny entered circulation, it wasn't treated gently. It wasn't stored. It wasn't admired. It was used. Ireland in the 1970s carried a different rhythm, economic uncertainty, global energy crises, and a generation focused more on survival than preservation. People weren't saving coins for the future. They were using every bit of currency they had to get through the present. So imagine how many of these coins were struck, and then imagine how few were ever protected. Bronze, as strong as it looks, is surprisingly vulnerable over long periods. Exposure to moisture, air, and friction slowly eats away at detail. The high points fade first, feathers, harp strings, lettering edges. Then comes discoloration, then dullness. Eventually, most coins lose their identity. They become smooth witnesses to time, their stories worn thin by decades of use. This is why the 1974 penny has a very different kind of rarity compared to newer coins. It's not rare because it was minted in tiny numbers. It's rare because it survived life. Think about that for a moment. Survival rarity is one of the most powerful forces in collecting. It's not about what was created. It's about what endured, and endurance is unpredictable. Some coins lived hard lives, dropped on concrete, exposed to rain, left in pockets through countless winters. Others vanished into landfills, forgotten drawers, or rusting tins in sheds. A few were melted unintentionally when metal recycling surged decades later. And quietly, without anyone noticing, the population of high-quality 1974 pennies began shrinking year after year. But here's where the emotional gravity of this coin really begins to build. Because coins from the mid-70s hold a certain psychological weight for today's older collectors. Many men now in their 40s, 50s, and 60s remember coins like this from childhood. They remember the feel of bronze change in their pockets, the sound of coins hitting wooden counters, the ritual of counting pennies before buying something small but meaningful. That memory connection is powerful, and in collecting, emotion drives demand more than most people realize. A coin that connects directly to memory becomes more than an object. It becomes a time anchor. The 1974 Irish penny carries that anchor strongly. Its design remained rooted in Ireland's identity. The harp still standing proudly, the hen and chicks still symbolizing grounded rural life. But over time, something interesting happened. As Ireland modernized and eventually transitioned to newer currency systems, coins like this slowly disappeared from everyday visibility. Not overnight, just gradually, quietly. And when something fades gradually, people rarely notice the loss until much later. That delayed realization is what fuels collector urgency today. Because once people understand that an object tied to their past is no longer easy to find in original condition, demand shifts instantly. It moves from casual interest to determined searching. And condition, once again, is everything. An average 1974 penny might still exist in worn form, but a sharply preserved one. Deep original tone, crisp edges, untouched surfaces. That's a completely different story. That's where rarity transforms from common history into collector-level scarcity. There's also another layer many viewers don't think about: time filtering. Every decade that passes removes more coins from the collectible pool. Accidental loss, corrosion, estate clearouts, and simple neglect all act like invisible filters. They keep reducing supply without anyone tracking it in real time. And while supply quietly drops, interest quietly rises. That imbalance creates pressure. You won't see headlines about it. You won't see loud advertisements. But inside collector circles, this slow squeeze is very real. The number of high-grade survivors continues shrinking, while awareness keeps expanding. And that's when values begin to move in ways that surprise the outside world. Because most people assume value explosions only happen with gold or ancient coins. But seasoned collectors know better. They know that overlooked base metal coins with strong survival rarity can sometimes outperform expectations dramatically, especially when nostalgia and scarcity intersect. The 1974 Irish penny sits right in that intersection. It represents a generation, a physical reminder of a more grounded time. And for many collectors, especially those who are now financially stable later in life, there's a strong pull to reclaim pieces of the past they once held without thinking. This creates a powerful cycle. Memory fuels demand, survival limits supply, and time amplifies both. And when those three forces align, quiet coins can suddenly command loud attention. Another fascinating aspect is how these coins re-enter the spotlight. Often, it's not through museums or official discoveries. It's through ordinary moments. A house clean-out, a forgotten tin opened after decades, a collection passed down from a parent or grandparent. That's how many rare survivors resurface. Not with fanfare, but with surprise. Imagine opening an old container and seeing bronze coins staring back at you, unaware that time transformed them into something far more significant than when they were first stored. That moment of realization is what keeps collectors searching. Because every rediscovery reminds the world that history is still hiding in everyday places. And here's something deeply important to understand. The longer a coin remains underestimated, the more dramatic its awakening can be. Because value doesn't just grow, awareness does. And when awareness catches up to rarity, prices can shift quickly. This is why seasoned collectors watch coins like the 1974 Irish penny closely. Not because it was flashy, not because it was rare from birth, but because it followed the most powerful path a collectible can take: quiet survival followed by delayed recognition. That pattern has repeated across collecting history again and again. Items dismissed for decades suddenly reevaluated. Objects once spent without thought becoming sought after once scarcity becomes undeniable. And every time that happens, the same reaction follows. Disbelief from the outside, determination from the inside. And right now, coins from this era are walking that exact line. Some are still hiding in plain sight, unrecognized by owners who haven't revisited them in years. Others have already entered collections where they may remain for generations. And every coin that disappears into a permanent collection reduces the chances for the next person to find one dot, which makes the remaining ones even more meaningful. Because in the end, collecting is not just about ownership. It's about timing, being aware before the wider world catches up, recognizing importance while it's still forming. And that's what makes the 1974 Irish penny such a compelling story. It teaches a powerful lesson that value doesn't always begin with rarity. Sometimes, rarity is created slowly, silently by time itself. And by the time most people notice, the window has already started to close. Now take a breath and let that settle in. Because what we've uncovered so far is a journey through survival and memory. Two coins shaped by time in very different ways. But the final coin brings an entirely different energy, a different era, a different kind of rarity, and a completely unexpected twist that changes how people think about modern coins altogether. Now we arrive at the final coin, and this is where the story takes a turn most people never expect. Because unlike the previous two coins shaped heavily by long survival and deep nostalgia, the 1996 Ireland 1 penny comes from a completely different era, a time when the world was already changing fast, when modernization was accelerating, and when many believed small bronze coins would always remain ordinary. That assumption is exactly what makes this coin so fascinating today. By 1996, Ireland was standing on the edge of transformation. The Celtic Tiger years were beginning to reshape the country's economy. Technology was advancing. Europe was integrating more tightly. And quietly, without most people fully realizing it, the days of traditional low-denomination coins were already numbered. But when this coin was minted, nobody treated it like the end of an era. It still looked familiar. Same warm bronze tone, same harp, same grounded rural imagery that had defined Irish coinage for generations. To the average person, it was just another penny, another small unit of currency meant to be spent and forgotten. And that's exactly what happened. Most 1996 Irish pennies lived very short, unremarkable lives. They moved quickly through circulation, used casually in a world that was already drifting toward digital systems. Unlike older coins that sometimes sat in jars for decades, many late-era bronze coins were either spent rapidly or discarded once they lost practical usefulness. And then something historic happened. Within a few years, Ireland transitioned toward the euro. Old denominations began disappearing from daily life. Coins that had once been everywhere suddenly had no role. People exchanged them, spent them off, or simply stopped paying attention to them. And during transitions like this, one powerful thing always happens: mass indifference. When people believe something is outdated, they rarely preserve it carefully. They clear it out. They cash it in. They throw it into storage without thought. That wave of indifference quietly erased countless coins from future collector pools. But here's where the twist lies. Because while older coins gained rarity through long survival, the 1996 penny gained rarity through abrupt relevance loss. It didn't have decades to slowly fade. It was pushed aside quickly by history itself. And that kind of rarity behaves differently. Coins from transitional periods often become symbolic. They represent the last breath of a system before something entirely new replaces it. And collectors, especially experienced ones, understand how powerful last-of-its-kind psychology can be. Think about it. This coin wasn't ancient. It wasn't made from precious metal. It didn't scream rarity at birth. But it marked the closing chapter of traditional Irish bronze coinage. And once that realization spreads, perception shifts instantly. Another fascinating factor is generational blind spots. Many people who owned 1996 pennies still remember them as recent. That mental label causes people to underestimate them. They don't associate the coin with deep history yet, even though nearly 3 decades have already passed. This delay in perception creates a unique window where rarity builds faster than awareness. And collectors pay attention to windows like that. Because when awareness finally catches up, the shift can be dramatic. Coins that felt modern suddenly feel historic. Objects once dismissed as recent become recognized as transitional artifacts. And once that psychological shift happens, demand can rise faster than anyone expects. There's also a condition factor that's often overlooked with late-era coins. Because they feel modern, people assume high-quality examples must be common. But the reality is often the opposite. Late circulation coins were heavily used and rarely preserved intentionally. By the time collectors start looking for pristine versions, they discover how few actually survived untouched. That realization creates shock inside collecting circles. Suddenly, a coin people ignored becomes difficult to locate in original mint condition. And difficulty changes everything. Because scarcity isn't theoretical anymore, it becomes visible, measurable, undeniable. The 1996 Irish penny carries that exact dynamic.it represents a quiet ending. A closing chapter hidden inside everyday currency. A coin that witnessed the final years before Ireland fully stepped into a new monetary identity. And that symbolic weight matters deeply to collectors who value transitions as much as origins. There's also something psychologically compelling about owning the end. Many collectors spend years chasing first-year issues, but seasoned enthusiasts know that last-year coins often hold equal emotional gravity. They mark conclusions. They define boundaries. They represent moments when history turned a page. Holding a coin like that feels different when you understand what it represents. It's no longer just bronze. It becomes a bookmark in time. And as awareness spreads slowly through collector communities, these late-era coins are beginning to gain a different kind of respect. Not loud hype, not sudden explosions, but a steady reevaluation driven by deeper understanding. Because true collectors don't just chase rarity, they chase meaning. And meaning grows as historical perspective expands. Right now, we're living in a period where physical money itself is becoming less central to everyday life. Contactless payments, digital wallets, and online transactions are reshaping how value moves. And as physical coins slowly step out of daily routines, something interesting happens. People begin looking back. They start valuing the tangible again. Coins that once felt insignificant gain emotional depth because they belong to a fading physical era. They remind people of a time when value had weight, sound, and texture. That broader shift is quietly lifting interest in transitional coins across the world. And the 1996 Irish penny fits perfectly into that pattern. It stands at the intersection of memory and modernization. Old enough to carry history, recent enough to feel personal. And that combination is powerful. Now step back for a moment and look at the full journey we've taken. 3 coins, 3 timelines, 3 different paths to hidden significance. Point 1 shaped by quiet survival over decades. Point 1 shaped by deep nostalgia and endurance through heavy circulation. And 1 shaped by sudden historical transition and delayed recognition. Each coin tells a different story, but together they reveal one powerful truth. Value doesn't follow a single formula. It forms in layers through time, memory, survival, and shifting perception. And here's the part that truly matters. Because when people first hear stories like these, they often assume rarity must always be obvious. They imagine treasure looking dramatic, ancient, or instantly recognizable. But reality is far more subtle. Some of the most surprising value stories begin with the most ordinary objects. Coins people ignored, coins people spent, coins people forgot. And sometimes the only difference between something priceless and something overlooked is awareness. That realization is what changes how people look at the world around them. It creates a new lens, one where everyday objects are no longer dismissed so quickly. Where drawers, jars, and old boxes suddenly hold possibility. Where history feels closer than it did before. Because the truth is simple but powerful. Time transforms objects quietly. And recognition always comes later. So now, as this journey comes to a close, let's bring everything into focus. The 1980 Ireland 1 penny, once just a modest bronze coin from a slower world, has reached collector levels where exceptional examples can command around $60,000. The 1974 Ireland 1 penny, shaped by heavy survival rarity and deep generational nostalgia, has stunned collectors with top-tier valuations reaching $97,000. And the 1996 Ireland 1 penny, the quiet end-of-era coin most people underestimated, has climbed to remarkable highs near $42,000 in outstanding preserved condition. Let that settle in for a moment. 3 small bronze coins, once ordinary, once ignored, now carrying stories, significance, and values few would have ever imagined. And that realization leaves you with one powerful question, not about the past, but about the present. What might still be hiding in plain sight today, waiting for time to reveal its true worth?